Have you ever realized how many relationships you've walked away from, almost as if it's a reflex? Maybe it's easier to cut people off than to deal with conflict, disappointment, or hurt. But here's the truth no one tells you. Every time you shut someone out, you're not just protecting yourself, you're also learning something about who you are and who you allow in your life. Today, we're going to uncover the hidden truths behind why we cut people off and what it really means for your growth. Have you ever noticed how quickly we reach for the unfriend button, block someone on social media, or simply walk away from people who upset us? On the surface, it might seem like a simple choice. Someone annoys you, you cut them out, but in reality, this behavior is rarely about them. Most of the time, cutting people off is a self-defense mechanism. It is a way for us to protect our emotional energy, to shield ourselves from the discomfort that comes with conflict, confrontation, or emotional pain. Our mind and heart instinctively push us toward the path of least resistance, and ending relationships feels like the easiest, fastest way to regain control. The self-defense mechanism often develops over time, especially in response to repeated hurt or betrayal. People who have experienced deep emotional wounds early in life may develop an automatic response to protect themselves. Cutting people off becomes a learned behavior, a survival tactic that prevents vulnerability. In many ways, it's our brain's way of saying, I will not risk being hurt again. While this instinct can be helpful in extreme situations like abusive or toxic relationships, it often activates in ordinary conflicts, leaving us cutting ties with people who may not deserve it. One reason this mechanism is so powerful is that it offers immediate relief. Emotions like frustration, anger, or disappointment can feel overwhelming, and removing the person causing them provides instant peace. The relief is almost addictive because our minds are wired to avoid pain. The problem is that while the immediate discomfort disappears, the underlying issues remain unresolved. We feel better momentarily, but the habit of running away from discomfort can create long-term challenges in how we connect with others and manage our emotions. Another subtle truth about this behavior is that it often reflects our personal boundaries, or sometimes the lack thereof. When we feel someone has crossed an invisible line, even slightly, cutting them off becomes a way to enforce a boundary. We may not fully understand or know how to communicate. For some, it's about protecting their mental space. For others, it's about avoiding feelings of inadequacy, rejection, or betrayal. Recognizing that these actions are boundary-driven can help us distinguish between situations where cutting ties is necessary versus situations where patience and communication could be more productive. However, while self-protection is a valid instinct, it's important to realize that repeatedly cutting people off can also prevent personal growth. Each time we avoid conflict instead of facing it, we miss an opportunity to develop emotional resilience. Life will always present us with challenging relationships, family members who push our buttons, friends who disappoint us, colleagues who frustrate us. Learning to navigate these interactions instead of immediately shutting them out teaches us patience, empathy, and self-control, skills that are essential for emotional maturity. It's also worth considering how much of this behavior is rooted in fear. Fear of confrontation, fear of being misunderstood, or fear of losing control can all push us to sever ties. The fear itself is not inherently bad. It is a signal that something matters deeply to us. But allowing fear to dictate our relationships means we often prioritize safety over growth. Every time we cut someone off impulsively, we may feel secure in the moment, but we also deny ourselves the chance to face discomfort, learn from it, and expand our capacity for connection. Interestingly, cutting people off can sometimes become a pattern, a reflexive behavior we repeat without fully thinking about it. Over time, this reflex can shape our social world, creating an environment where we are rarely challenged and seldom vulnerable. While we might tell ourselves that this is protection, the reality is that it can lead to isolation and a limited perspective on relationships. Recognizing this pattern is the first step in transforming it from an automatic defense into a conscious choice. Finally, understanding that cutting people off is often a self-defense mechanism allows us to approach our relationships with more self-awareness. Instead of labeling ourselves as cold or unfeeling, we can recognize that these actions stem from a desire to protect our hearts and minds. This awareness opens the door to growth. We can choose when cutting ties is truly necessary and when it might be more beneficial to face discomfort, set clear boundaries, and engage in honest communication. By doing so, we transform a defensive reaction into a tool for intentional, empowered living. When you cut people off quickly, it's easy to think the problem lies entirely with them. Maybe they were rude, dismissive, or didn't meet your expectations, but the truth is often deeper than that. How we react to others, especially in moments of discomfort or conflict, says more about our own patterns, fears, and emotional triggers than it does about the person on the other side. Our relationships act like mirror, reflecting our insecurities, unresolved emotions, and boundaries that need attention. The faster we recognize this, the more insight we gain into our own hearts and minds. Every time someone irritates or upsets you, pause and ask yourself, why does this bother me so much? Often the reaction is not proportional to the action. A minor comment or a slight disagreement might provoke an outsized response because it touches on unresolved pain from the past. It could be a childhood wound, a fear of rejection, or a lingering insecurity about your worth. Cutting people off in these moments doesn't eliminate the source of discomfort. It only temporarily silences the mirror reflecting it back at you. Our emotional triggers are like hidden codes waiting to be decoded. When someone pushes your buttons, it's rarely about them intentionally trying to hurt you. It's about them activating something already present inside you. For example, if a friend forgets to text you back and you immediately end the friendship, it might reveal a deeper fear of abandonment or feeling unimportant. Recognizing this pattern allows you to work on yourself rather than endlessly blaming others for their perceived faults. Another layer of insight comes from examining your expectations of others. Sometimes we cut people off because they fail to behave in the way we think they should. But these expectations often reveal more about our ideals and control issues than about the other person. Life isn't always fair, and people are imperfect. By noticing our quick judgments, we begin to understand our need for validation, perfection, or control, and we learn that letting go of unrealistic expectations can lead to healthier, longer-lasting relationships. It's also important to recognize that cutting people off can be a form of emotional projection. Projection happens when we attribute our own feelings, fears, or flaws onto someone else. For instance, if you are struggling with your own anger or resentment and react by severing ties, you might be projecting that inner turmoil onto the other person. The more we become aware of these projections, the more empowered we are to address our internal struggles instead of letting them dictate our interactions. Reflecting on why we cut people off helps us differentiate between real toxicity and our personal discomfort. Not everyone who challenges, irritates, or disappoints us is harmful. Sometimes they are simply exposing aspects of ourselves that need attention. If a colleague points out a flaw in your work and you feel compelled to walk away, the truth may be that it triggers your fear of failure rather than indicating malice on their part. This perspective shift transforms every difficult interaction into an opportunity for self-awareness. Learning from these patterns requires patience and honesty. It means resisting the instinct to immediately remove someone from your life and instead asking yourself probing questions. What is this person showing me about myself? What emotions are being triggered and why? How can I respond in a way that honors both myself and them? Over time, this practice not only strengthens your emotional intelligence, but also allows you to maintain meaningful relationships without compromising your peace. Ultimately, understanding that cutting people off says more about you than them is liberating. It removes the need for guilt or shame because it reframes the act as a reflection of your own journey, not a judgment of the other person. By embracing this mindset, you can approach relationships with curiosity rather than reaction, awareness rather than avoidance, and growth rather than fear. Every interaction becomes a chance to learn something profound about who you are, what you value, and how you want to show up in the world. Every relationship you have, whether brief or long-lasting, easy or challenging, offers lessons. When we cut people off at the first sign of conflict or discomfort, we deny ourselves the opportunity to learn those lessons. Emotional growth is forged in the fire of real human interaction. Difficult conversations, misunderstandings, and moments of hurt are not inconveniences. They are the raw materials from which empathy, patience, and resilience are built. By constantly avoiding these moments, we stunt our own emotional development, keeping ourselves safe but also small. Growth often comes disguised as discomfort. Someone who challenges your views, points out your flaws, or tests your patience may feel irritating or even harmful in the moment. But those very interactions are opportunities to expand your emotional capacity. When we cut people off instead of leaning into these lessons, we miss the chance to learn how to regulate our emotions, communicate effectively, and practice forgiveness. Each interaction avoided is a step away from the kind of emotional maturity that makes life richer and more meaningful. Another way cutting people off limits growth is by preventing us from learning the art of conflict resolution. Conflict is inevitable in any relationship because no two people think, feel, or act the same way. Avoiding conflict by walking away ensures temporary peace but erodes the skills we need to navigate disagreements in a healthy manner. Learning to express feelings clearly, negotiate differences, and maintain respect during tense moments builds emotional intelligence, resilience, and confidence, qualities that serve us not only in relationships, but in every area of life. When we habitually cut ties, we also miss the opportunity to develop empathy. Empathy requires patience, perspective, and willingness to understand another person's experience, even if it is uncomfortable or contradictory to our own. By walking away, we avoid having to step into someone else's shoes to feel what they feel or to consider how our actions impact them. Over time, this can create a pattern where we struggle to connect deeply with others or relying on avoidance rather than engagement as a default strategy. It's also worth noting that cutting people off can reinforce fear-based thinking. When our instinct is always to protect ourselves from discomfort, we reinforce the idea that emotions like frustration, anger, or disappointment are dangerous or unbearable. In reality, these emotions are natural signals that something important is happening. They are opportunities to reflect, adapt, and grow. Avoiding them may bring temporary relief, but it also keeps us from learning how to tolerate and process emotional challenges effectively. Furthermore, cutting people off prevents us from experiencing the full spectrum of human connection. Relationships are not always easy or perfect. They are messy, unpredictable, and sometimes uncomfortable. But it is precisely this complexity that teaches us resilience, self-awareness, and the ability to navigate life with grace. By severing ties too quickly, we miss the lessons hidden in disagreements, misunderstandings, and moments of tension, and we reduce our lives to interactions that are safe, predictable, and emotionally shallow. Growth also comes from reflection after difficult experiences. When we cut people off, we often avoid not only the challenge itself, but the chance to look inward afterward. Moments of regret, introspection, and understanding often arise after tough conversations or conflicts. These reflections help us understand our triggers, recognize our patterns, and make more conscious choices in future relationships. By removing these opportunities, we limit the depth of our emotional self-awareness. Finally, understanding that cutting people off can limit emotional growth empowers us to make more intentional decisions about relationships. It doesn't mean we must tolerate toxic behavior or stay in harmful situations. It means distinguishing between true harm and temporary discomfort. When we allow ourselves to engage, reflect, and grow through relational challenges, we expand our emotional capacity and resilience. Every relationship, even the difficult ones, becomes a classroom for life, teaching lessons we cannot learn by walking away alone. Cutting people off might feel empowering in the moment, a way to regain control over your emotional space, but over time it can quietly lead to loneliness and isolation. When we remove people from our lives at the first sign of conflict or discomfort, we reduce the number of meaningful connections we maintain. Human beings are inherently social creatures. We thrive on connection, shared experiences, and emotional intimacy. By consistently shutting people out, we risk living in a bubble where emotional safety comes at the cost of genuine companionship. Loneliness doesn't always announce itself dramatically. Often it creeps in gradually, like a slow fade of colors in a painting. At first, it may feel like freedom, fewer conflicts, less stress, and more personal space. But over time, the absence of deep connections can create a sense of emptiness. The moments we once shared with friends, colleagues, or even casual acquaintances begin to feel like missed opportunities. That protective instinct that led us to cut ties starts to show a hidden cost. We may have fewer people to celebrate victories with, to confide in during struggles, or simply to share life's ordinary moments. Isolation also affects our emotional well-being. Studies show that loneliness is linked to increased stress, anxiety, and even physical health issues. Relationships, even imperfect ones, provide support systems that help us navigate life's challenges. Cutting people off to avoid minor discomfort may feel safe in the short term, but it can create long-term emotional vulnerability. The very act meant to protect us can unintentionally strip away the support we need to thrive. Another consequence of this pattern is the development of a cautious or guarded mindset. When we constantly remove people from our lives at the first sign of tension, we begin to anticipate hurt in every interaction. We might hesitate to open up, share our thoughts, or trust others. This self-protective approach, while understandable, can prevent us from forming authentic relationships. Over time, the fear of vulnerability can outweigh the desire for connection, leaving us isolated and disconnected from the very people who could enrich our lives. It's also important to recognize how this behavior affects our social skills. Human relate. Ion ships require practice, patience, and sometimes even discomfort. By avoiding difficult interactions, we lose opportunities to develop these skills. Conflict resolution, empathy, and communication are honed through experience. Walking away may seem easier, but it robs us of the chance to navigate complexities and grow into more emotionally intelligent and resilient individuals. In a sense, isolation can stunt our relational growth just as much as it limits our connections. Moreover, loneliness can have a compounding effect. When we cut people off frequently, we may find ourselves with fewer friends and acquaintances, making new connections more challenging. Social circles shrink, and opportunities for meaningful engagement become limited. Over time, this can create a feedback loop. The more isolated we become, the more likely we are to withdraw at the first sign of conflict, further perpetuating loneliness. Recognizing this pattern is crucial because it allows us to take intentional steps toward healthier, more balanced relationships. Cutting people off can also diminish our sense of belonging. Humans crave acceptance and understanding, and even imperfect relationships contribute to a feeling of being part of something larger than ourselves. Isolation deprives us of this sense of community, leaving us feeling disconnected from the world around us. Celebrating achievements alone, navigating struggles in solitude, or lacking a sounding board for our ideas can gradually create emotional fatigue and a sense that life is less vibrant. Finally, understanding the risk of loneliness and isolation doesn't mean we must tolerate toxicity or abuse. Rather, it highlights the importance of discernment and balance. Maintaining connections doesn't require enduring constant discomfort. It requires reflection, communication, and sometimes patience. By learning to navigate relationships rather than immediately cutting ties, we can protect our emotional health while also fostering meaningful bonds. This balance allows us to experience both safety and connection, enriching our lives in ways that avoidance alone never can. One of the most important truths to understand when it comes to cutting people off is that not every unpleasant experience indicates a toxic relationship. Many people confuse discomfort with danger, irritation with harm, or challenge with betrayal. The reality is that discomfort is a natural part of any meaningful relationship, while toxicity involves consistent harm, manipulation, or abuse. Learning to distinguish between these two is crucial because it determines whether cutting someone off is protective or unnecessarily limiting. Discomfort often arises when someone challenges us, intellectually, emotionally, or behaviorally. A friend may question your decisions. A colleague may provide constructive criticism, or a family member may confront you about a pattern in your behavior. These situations can feel awkward, frustrating, or even painful. However, discomfort does not equal toxicity. Instead, it often serves as a mirror, reflecting aspects of ourselves that need attention, growth, or understanding. Avoiding discomfort altogether can stunt self-awareness and personal development. Toxicity, on the other hand, is a pattern of consistent harm. It may involve manipulation, dishonesty, disrespect, or abuse, behaviors that erode your well-being over time. The key difference is that toxicity drains, disempowers, and repeatedly violates boundaries, while discomfort challenges, teaches, and may provoke temporary unease. Recognizing this distinction helps prevent impulsive decisions to sever ties with people who are not truly harmful, but are simply pushing us out of our comfort zones. Discomfort can also act as a catalyst for self-reflection. For example, if someone points out a habit you didn't realize was hurtful, your initial reaction may be defensive. It may sting, make you angry, or even provoke thoughts of walking away. But this is an opportunity to pause and reflect. Is this discomfort highlighting a real issue within myself that needs attention? By sitting with these feelings rather than fleeing from them, we transform uncomfortable moments into powerful opportunities for growth and emotional intelligence. Another important aspect of distinguishing toxicity from discomfort is the intention behind the behavior. Toxic people often act with disregard for your feelings, boundaries, or well-being, while those who challenge you or provoke discomfort may have your growth or relationship in mind. Understanding the intent behind actions allows us to respond more thoughtfully, rather than reacting impulsively. When we cut someone off without evaluating intention, we risk losing people who could play a meaningful, positive role in our lives. Additionally, recognizing the difference between toxicity and discomfort strengthens resilience. Life is inherently unpredictable, and relationships are rarely smooth. Learning to tolerate and navigate discomfort equips us with the tools to handle challenges not only in personal relationships, but in professional, familial, and social contexts. Avoidance may feel safer, but it fosters fragility. Facing discomfort head-on builds adaptability and confidence. It's also important to remember that discomfort is often temporary, while toxicity tends to be persistent. A heated argument, a moment of criticism, or a difference in values can provoke immediate unease, but these moments usually pass, leaving lessons, understanding, and sometimes a stronger connection. Toxic behavior, however, recurs and escalates, eroding trust and well-being over time. By learning to distinguish between the two, we avoid cutting people off for minor transient issues while maintaining safety in genuinely harmful situations. Finally, understanding this distinction empowers us to make more intentional decisions in our relationships. We can choose when to walk away, when to set boundaries, and when to lean into discomfort for the sake of growth. This approach fosters healthier relationships, deeper self-awareness, and emotional resilience. Rather than reacting impulsively, we respond with clarity, wisdom, and confidence. By learning to tolerate discomfort without mistaking it for toxicity, we allow ourselves to grow, connect, and thrive in ways that avoidance alone could never achieve. One of the biggest misconceptions about cutting people off is that it is the same as setting boundaries. In reality, boundaries and burning bridges are very different concepts, and understanding this distinction is crucial for emotional health and relational growth. Boundaries are about protecting your well-being, communicating your limits, and maintaining self-respect. Burning bridges, on the other hand, is an impulsive act of severing ties entirely, often without reflection, leaving little room for reconciliation, growth, or mutual understanding. Boundaries are intentional and thoughtful. They involve recognizing what you will and will not tolerate and then communicating those limits clearly. For instance, you might decide that you cannot tolerate disrespectful language, or manipulation from a friend. Setting a boundary might mean calmly explaining your limits and stating the consequences if they are crossed. This approach preserves your integrity while keeping the door open for dialogue, growth, and change. Boundaries create a structure for relationships. They define the space where healthy interaction can occur. Burning bridges, however, is often reactive and impulsive. It typically comes from a place of anger, fear, or frustration rather than deliberate reflection. When you immediately cut someone off after feeling hurt or misunderstood, you are not necessarily enforcing a boundary. You are escaping discomfort. While this might feel empowering in the moment, it eliminates the possibility of resolution or growth. Bridges burned in haste may take years to rebuild if they can ever be restored at all. The key difference between boundaries and burning bridges lies in intention and awareness. Boundaries are proactive and serve both parties by establishing mutual respect. Burning bridges is reactive and often serves only the individual's short-term emotional relief. By learning to recognize this difference, you can protect yourself without closing off opportunities for understanding, empathy, or reconciliation. This distinction allows you to navigate relationships with wisdom rather than impulsivity. Boundaries also encourage self-responsibility. When you set a boundary, you acknowledge that you are responsible for your own well-being, but not for controlling or punishing others. For example, if a friend repeatedly cancels plans, a boundary might involve clearly communicating that repeated cancellations affect your willingness to make future plans without cutting them off immediately. This approach respects both your needs and theirs while maintaining the relationship's potential for growth. Burning bridges, on the other hand, can sometimes stem from unhealed emotional wounds or unresolved patterns. When past hurts influence present reactions, we might cut people off to protect ourselves, even when the relationship could have been healthy with proper communication. Recognizing this pattern is vital because it allows us to respond intentionally rather than react impulsively. It shifts us from being passive victims of our emotions to being active participants in shaping our relational lives. Another important point is that boundaries create empowerment, while burning bridges can create regret. When we thoughtfully enforce limits, we feel confident, clear, and in control of our emotional space. When we impulsively sever ties, we may feel relief at first, but over time, regret often creeps in. Questions about whether we acted too hastily, whether the person was truly harmful, or whether we missed an opportunity for growth. Boundaries minimize regret by combining protection with clarity, while burned bridges maximize uncertainty and isolation. Finally, understanding the difference between boundaries and burning bridges transforms how we approach relationships. It allows us to protect our energy without sacrificing potential growth, connection, or learning. We can walk away from genuinely harmful situations, but we can also navigate discomfort, challenge, and conflict without severing ties unnecessarily. This awareness cultivates emotional maturity, resilience, and relational wisdom. By drawing clear boundaries instead of impulsively burning bridges, we create a life where our relationships serve us in our growth rather than limiting or controlling it. Before cutting someone off, pausing to reflect can transform an impulsive reaction into a conscious, empowered decision. Reflection allows us to examine our emotions, understand our triggers, and separate temporary frustration from long-term considerations. Acting impulsively often feels like liberation in the moment, but it can create regret, misunderstandings, and missed opportunities. Emotional strength is built not by avoiding conflict, but by pausing to evaluate the situation before responding. Reflection begins with asking yourself key questions. Why am I feeling this way? Is this about the other person, or is it about something inside me? Am I running away from discomfort or protecting myself from harm? By honestly answering these questions, you gain clarity about the nature of the conflict and your own emotional needs. This self-inquiry transforms reactions into informed decisions, ensuring that the choices we make align with our values and long-term well-being. Another important aspect of reflection is recognizing emotional triggers. Often, the urge to cut someone off is not proportional to the situation at hand. Small disagreements or minor annoyances may provoke strong reactions because they activate past wounds or insecurity. Reflection helps identify these triggers, allowing us to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. Over time, this practice strengthens emotional resilience and prevents recurring patterns of avoidance. Reflection also encourages empathy. When we pause to consider the other person's perspective, we often discover that their actions were not malicious, but merely different from our expectations. Understanding their motives, context, and limitations can soften our response and open the door to constructive dialogue. This approach not only preserves relationships that matter, but also strengthens our capacity for patience, understanding, and emotional intelligence. Importantly, reflection before action helps differentiate between short-term discomfort and long-term harm. Immediate emotional reactions often exaggerate the significance of a conflict, making it feel bigger than it truly is. By taking a step back, we gain perspective, evaluating whether cutting someone off is necessary or if setting a boundary, having a conversation, or waiting for emotions to settle would be more effective. This perspective reduces regret and builds confidence in our decision-making. Reflection also allows for intentional closure when necessary. There are times when cutting someone off is the healthiest choice, especially in toxic or harmful relationships. Reflecting beforehand ensures that this decision is deliberate, not impulsive. It allows us to communicate clearly, honor our boundaries, and walk away with a sense of peace rather than resentment or confusion. Conscious decisions foster emotional strength because they come from clarity, not from uncontrolled reaction. Additionally, the practice of reflection builds self-awareness over time. The more we pause, analyze, and consider the root causes of our emotions, the more attuned we become to our values, limits, and patterns. This self-awareness becomes a guiding compass, helping us navigate future relationships with intentionality, patience, and wisdom. It transforms every challenging interaction into an opportunity for growth rather than a trigger for avoidance. Finally, reflection before action cultivates emotional maturity and long-term resilience. Life is full of complex relationships, misunderstandings, and inevitable conflicts. By consistently practicing reflection, we learn to navigate these complexities with grace, balance, and confidence. We become capable of protecting our emotional well-being while maintaining meaningful connections. Reflection transforms cutting someone off from a knee-jerk reaction into a conscious choice, empowering us to live in alignment with our values, strengthen our relationships, and grow emotionally stronger with each decision we make. So, what is the truth about cutting people off easily? It's not as simple as deciding who deserves your time and who doesn't. Every time we shut someone out, we are revealing as much about ourselves as we are about them. We are uncovering our fears, our triggers, our patterns, and learning how we respond to discomfort, conflict, and growth. Cutting someone off isn't inherently wrong, but when done impulsively, it can limit our emotional growth, isolate us, and prevent us from becoming the most resilient, self-aware version of ourselves. The power lies in choice. Before ending a relationship, ask yourself, am I protecting myself or am I avoiding growth? Am I reacting or am I responding? By reflecting, setting clear boundaries, and distinguishing between discomfort and toxicity, we can make decisions that honor both our well-being and our capacity for connection. Life is too short to burn bridges unnecessarily, yet too precious to allow harmful relationships to drain our energy. Remember, every interaction is an opportunity, a mirror reflecting who we are, who we aspire to be, and the kind of relationships we want to cultivate. Growth, empathy, patience, and resilience are not built in comfort. They are forged in challenge. By approaching relationships intentionally, we can protect our hearts without closing them off, learning from every person we encounter along the way. So the next time you feel the urge to cut someone off, pause, reflect, ask the tough questions, and make the choice consciously. That choice, thoughtful, deliberate, and grounded in self-awareness, is the truth no one tells you. The way you handle your relationships says more about your growth than anyone else's behavior ever could.